Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the elect have obtained, and the rest were blinded. Just as it is written, God has given them a spirit of stupor, eyes that they should not see, ears that they should not hear to this very day. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a recompense to them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they do not see, and bow down their back always. This is what we're looking at as we're seeing here now. Keep in mind that once again, we're not on a new subject. We're still on that principle of justification. We've looked at where Romans has continually brought out this whole principle of justification. And the first 4 chapters, he explains what justification is. Chapters 5 through 8, he begins to show the security and experience of justification. And then 9 through 11, he begins to defend this whole issue of justification, but he uses Israel as that example. Remember now, in Romans 9 through 11, as we've been in this portion here for a while, Paul answers the question that if justification by faith is based on God's promise and God's work alone, and only that, then why did Israel, as God's chosen nation, miss it? So how does Israel's unbelief and the Gentiles' inclusion fit into this plan of justification through grace? Well, 9 through 11 answers the question. One, as we're going to see here, it's true Israel, believing Israel, trusting Israel. God's word has not failed. God's promises have not failed. And so we understand what in chapter 9 he speaks of their past, in chapter 10 he speaks of their present, and now in chapter 11 he's going to speak of their future. And so as we look to this, we recognize that here, last week we began to look at the court of law. I started out by, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. And so what happened was this. We saw that Israel stood guilty of rejecting God. And as we saw that, then we recognized that they refused God's plan of justification for their own. And that's what we spent that time last week looking at. And Paul went through, in a sense, a legal case, just showing evidence after evidence of evidence. They rejected God's plan. They wanted their own plan instead. And we ended in verse 21. When we ended in verse 21, Romans 10 verse 21 says this, but to Israel he says, all day long I've stretched out my hands. I've stretched out my hands to a disobedient and contrary people. So we understood what? That he is still reaching out to Israel. Now, chapter 11 is basically a continuation of what? God reaching out his hands. So if you want to know what chapter 11 is in this remnant, it's God still reaching out his hands to a disobedient and a contrary people.